Hello everyone. Welcome back to Shadow Storyteller. Before we dive into tonight's tale, don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a comment below if you enjoy listening to these stories before going to bed. Your support helps us bring more late-night mysteries and real experiences to share with you. Now, let's begin our story for tonight. It was the night of August 17th, 2019, when three friends, Daniel, Claire, and Matthew, were driving back to Sacramento after spending the weekend in Carson City, Nevada. They had left a little later than planned, around 11 p.m., and by the time they reached Highway 50, the road was almost completely deserted. Highway 50, often called the loneliest road in America, stretched endlessly before them, cutting through the Nevada desert with nothing but sand, rock, and the occasional cluster of trees. The night sky above was unusually clear, filled with countless stars that seemed brighter than ever in the absence of city lights. By midnight, the atmosphere inside the car had grown quiet. The radio played softly, a mix of old classic rock songs that Matthew had on his playlist. Claire, sitting in the back seat, had her head leaned against the window, half asleep. Daniel was driving, while Matthew sat in the passenger seat, sipping the last of his energy drink to keep himself awake. The road felt timeless, almost as if they were moving through an endless tunnel of darkness. There were no streetlights, no passing cars, and no signs of civilization. Just the headlights cutting through the desert night. Then, at exactly 12:14 a.m., something unusual happened. Daniel slowed the car as they noticed a figure standing on the side of the road. At first, it looked like a man, dressed in a long coat, holding something in his hand. He wasn't moving, just standing there, staring into the desert. "Do you see that?" Daniel whispered, his voice tense. Matthew leaned forward, squinting. "Yeah, but what the hell is he doing out here? There's nothing for miles." Claire stirred awake in the back seat. She rubbed her eyes and looked out the window. "Wait, is someone standing there?" she asked, her voice groggy but nervous. As they drew closer, the figure turned his head slowly toward the car. The headlights revealed a pale face, almost unnaturally pale and dark, hollow eyes that seemed to reflect the light like glass. In his hand, he appeared to be holding an old lantern, though no flame flickered inside it. Daniel's grip tightened on the steering wheel. He instinctively pressed the gas pedal to pass quickly, but as the car sped by, Claire gasped. "He's gone!" she cried, twisting her head to look back. Matthew turned too, but the stretch of road behind them was empty. No man, no lantern, just darkness. The three friends sat in silence, the only sound the steady hum of the engine. Daniel didn't speak, his jaw clenched, while Matthew muttered under his breath. "That's not possible. We all saw him." Claire hugged her jacket tighter around her. "I don't like this," she whispered. "It's like he disappeared." Moments later, Daniel's headlights caught something else in the distance, a faint glimmer on the road ahead. As they drew closer, it became clear. The same figure was standing there again, this time directly in the middle of the highway, lantern in hand. Daniel slammed the brakes, the tires screeching against the asphalt. The car jolted, and all three of them held their breath as the headlights illuminated the figure completely. But just as suddenly as before, he vanished, gone without a trace, leaving only the empty road stretching into the darkness. Matthew's hands shook as he fumbled for his phone, trying to take a picture, but the screen showed nothing unusual. Claire was nearly in tears, whispering prayers under her breath. Daniel finally broke the silence. "We're not stopping again. We're getting out of here." And with that, he pressed the accelerator hard, the car speeding down Highway 50 at nearly 90 miles per hour. None of them spoke. None of them dared to look back. But just when they thought they had left it behind, something strange began to happen inside the car itself. Inside the car, the air felt heavier than before, as if something unseen had slipped in with them when they passed the figure. The temperature seemed to drop. Claire shivered in the back seat, hugging her jacket closer, while Matthew kept glancing at the rearview mirror. Daniel focused on the road ahead, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. It was now 12:26 a.m. The desert outside remained silent, the road stretching endlessly forward. But the feeling in the car was anything but calm. Matthew tried to shake off the tension with a nervous laugh. Maybe it was just some guy out here. Hitchhiker, prospector, who knows? Could have been a trick of the light. Claire leaned forward, her voice trembling. Matthew, we all saw the same thing. Twice. First on the side of the road, then right in the middle. Don't tell me it was just the light. Daniel didn't say a word, his eyes fixed straight ahead. His jaw was locked so tight it almost looked painful. Then, without warning, the car's radio crackled. The soft classic rock playlist that had been playing all night was suddenly interrupted by static. The sound was harsh, sharp, almost like whispers buried inside the noise. Matthew reached out and tapped the screen, trying to fix it, but the static didn't stop. Through the hiss, a faint voice emerged. It was low, distorted, but unmistakably human. Don't stop, keep driving. The three of them froze. Claire's hand flew to her mouth. Matthew yanked the cord from his phone, disconnecting it from the stereo. But the voice continued as if the radio had a life of its own. You shouldn't be here. Daniel slammed his palm against the dashboard. What the hell is happening? He muttered, his voice breaking with fear. He turned the volume knob all the way down, but the whispering didn't fade. It grew clearer, louder, filling the car with a sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Claire began to cry quietly. Please, Daniel, just keep driving. Don't stop for anything. They sped forward for another 15 minutes, passing nothing but empty road and the occasional mile marker. Yet the feeling of being watched didn't go away. Daniel's eyes flickered to the mirrors again and again, as though expecting to see that pale figure standing in the back seat. At 12:41 a.m., the headlights illuminated something lying on the road. Daniel swerved at the last second, the tires screeching as the car barely avoided hitting it. Everyone gasped as they looked back. It was a lantern, the same lantern the figure had been holding, now lying on the asphalt, flickering faintly as if some invisible flame burned inside. Daniel didn't slow down. He pressed harder on the gas, the engine roaring as the car tore through the silence of the desert. But then Claire screamed. What's that? In the back seat. Daniel glanced at the rear-view mirror, and for just a second, he saw it too. A pale face reflected in the glass, sitting right behind Claire, watching her. Its dark eyes stared straight into Daniel's through the mirror. He swerved violently, the car veering toward the desert shoulder before he corrected himself and pulled back onto the highway. Claire was sobbing now, her hands clawing at the door handle as if trying to escape. Matthew spun around in his seat, but the back seat was empty. I saw it, Daniel whispered, his voice hollow. I swear I saw it. Matthew turned back, his face pale. We need to stop. We need to get out of this car. No! Claire screamed. If we stop, we're done. Whatever that thing is, it wants us to stop. The argument filled the car, But then the radio, despite being shut off, came alive again. This time, the voice was stronger, clearer. "Turn around," it said. "Turn around now." The words repeated over and over, louder each time, until Daniel shouted and hit the dashboard. "Shut up," he screamed, but the voice kept going. Finally, with a sudden jolt, all the sounds stopped. The car was silent again except for the pounding of their hearts. It was now 1:03 a.m. The desert air outside shimmered faintly with heat, though inside the car, their breath came out in small clouds as though it were winter. Daniel's hands trembled on the wheel. "We can't keep going like this," Matthew whispered. "Something is playing with us. It knows where we are, what we're doing. We need to figure out." But before he could finish, the headlights caught something on the side of the road again. A small wooden sign, old, cracked, leaning slightly as if it had been there for decades. The letters, barely legible in the glow of the headlights, read, "Silver Peak, 2 miles." Daniel frowned. Silver Peak? That town was abandoned years ago. Nobody lives there anymore. But something in his gut told him that the road was pulling them there, whether they wanted it or not. Claire shook her head, wiping tears from her face. "Please, don't go into that town. Let's just keep going straight." Matthew leaned forward, his voice low. "If we keep driving into nothing, this thing is going to follow us forever. Maybe if we go into the town, we'll find out what it wants." Daniel didn't answer, but the choice was already made. The car slowed, turning off the main stretch of Highway 50 onto a smaller, cracked road leading towards Silver Peak. The tires crunched over gravel, the headlights illuminating broken wooden fences and telephone poles that no longer carried wires. The deeper they drove, the more the ruins of the town revealed themselves. Old wooden buildings leaned precariously against the desert wind. A rusted water tower loomed in the distance. The windows of the houses were dark, hollow, like empty eyes staring at them as they passed. The silence was suffocating. No animals, no wind, not even the sound of insects. Just the car engine echoing through the abandoned town. Finally, they reached the center square, where a stone well stood in the middle of cracked pavement. Daniel brought the car to a stop, the headlights washing over the buildings that surrounded them. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the radio turned itself back on. This time, there was no static, no distortion, just a clear, calm voice. "Welcome back." Claire's scream pierced the night. The voice on the radio lingered in the air, calm yet chilling, as if someone was speaking from inside the car itself. "Welcome back." Daniel's grip on the steering wheel loosened slightly, his knuckles no longer white but trembling. He stared straight ahead at the abandoned square, the stone well illuminated by the headlights. Claire covered her ears, whispering prayers under her breath, rocking slightly as though trying to wake from a nightmare. Matthew leaned forward, his eyes darting between the radio and the darkness outside the car. The town of Silver Peak was completely still. The old saloon on the left looked as though it would collapse with the slightest push. Across from it, what had once been a church stood with its roof caved in, the wooden cross at the top broken in half. The air smelled faintly of dust and rust, dry and metallic like old blood. It was 1:14 a.m. The three of them sat frozen, listening. Then the voice spoke again. "Don't leave the car." The words were softer this time, almost like advice. Daniel exchanged a glance with Matthew. Both men understood that leaving the car felt like suicide. but staying in it made their skin crawl. Claire kept shaking her head, muttering, "No, no, no. We shouldn't be here. We shouldn't have come." Daniel finally found his voice. "We need to turn around. Now." He shifted the gear, the engine growled, and the car began to roll backward. But before he could complete the turn, the headlights flickered. For a brief moment, the square was plunged into complete darkness. When the lights came back, the scene outside had changed. The buildings looked newer. The saloon's walls were freshly painted. The church roof stood tall and unbroken, and the well in the center looked polished, almost new. The town was no longer a ruin. It was alive. Matthew's jaw dropped. "Daniel, do you see this?" Claire covered her mouth with both hands. "Oh my God!" Figures appeared in the windows. Dozens of them. Men in wide-brimmed hats, women in long dresses, children peeking curiously from behind curtains. Their faces were pale, their eyes dark and reflective, just like the figure they had seen on the highway. None of them moved. None of them blinked. They just stared at the car. Daniel's hands shook as he tried to back the car away. But the road behind them had disappeared. Where the cracked asphalt had been, there was now only desert sand stretching endlessly. The way out was gone. The radio hissed again. "You are not supposed to be here." Claire screamed, "We have to get out. We have to get out right now." She reached for the door handle, but Matthew grabbed her arm. "No! Didn't you hear what it said? Don't leave the car." The whispering voices began to rise outside, faint at first, but quickly swelling into a chorus. They weren't coming from any one direction. They seemed to echo from every wall, every building, every dark corner of the town. The sound was like hundreds of people whispering at once, their words overlapping, too many to understand. Daniel pressed the accelerator hard. The car jolted forward, heading straight for the empty main street. The headlights illuminated more figures. Men with lanterns, women holding children, standing silently as the car raced past them. None of them moved to block the road. They just turned their heads slowly, their eyes following the vehicle. It was 1:37 a.m. The car roared down the street, but no matter how far they drove, the town didn't end. The same buildings kept appearing again and again, the same saloon, the same church, the same well. It was like driving in a circle that had no escape. Matthew was sweating, his voice breaking. "We're trapped. We're not getting out." Daniel clenched his teeth. "There has to be a way. Every place has a way out." Claire pointed suddenly. "There, look, by the well." In the center of the square, illuminated faintly by moonlight, stood the figure from the highway. The man with the lantern. His coat swayed gently though there was no wind. His pale face turned toward the car, his hollow eyes reflecting the headlights. This time, the lantern he carried glowed faintly, a weak golden light flickering inside it. He lifted it slowly, raising it high, as though guiding them. Then he turned and began walking toward a narrow alley between two buildings. The radio whispered again. "Follow." Daniel's stomach churned. Every part of him screamed not to trust it, but they had no other option. He steered the car toward the alley. The tires crunched over uneven cobblestones as the headlights cut into the narrow passage. The figure walked steadily ahead, never looking back, the lantern swinging in his hand. The whispers grew quieter. The further they followed, the more the voices faded, until only silence remained. The alley opened into another street, darker than the rest, lined with collapsed houses and broken carts. The figure stopped in front of a large wooden building with double doors chained shut. He turned, finally facing them fully. His mouth opened as if to speak, but no sound came. Instead, the radio inside the car picked up his words. Inside, the truth is inside. The figure pointed at the building, then lowered his lantern. Slowly, his body faded, dissolving into the darkness like smoke. The lantern fell to the ground, landing upright, still glowing faintly. Daniel parked the car, his chest heaving. Claire was crying uncontrollably now. "No, please, don't go in there. Don't listen to it." Matthew looked at Daniel, his face pale but determined. "If this is the only way out, we have to see what's inside." Daniel hesitated, his mind racing. He knew staying in the car felt safer, but the figure had led them here for a reason. Maybe the only way to end this was to step inside that building. It was 2:04 a.m. The night in Silver Peak was colder than ever. The wind howled faintly now, rattling the broken shutters of the houses. The faint glow of the lantern cast long shadows across the ground. Every instinct told them to stay put, but something deeper, something they couldn't explain, pulled them toward the chained doors. Matthew's hand reached for the door handle, ready to open it. Claire clutched Daniel's arm, shaking her head desperately. "Don't let him go in," she begged. "If he opens that door, none of us are leaving here alive." Daniel's hand hovered over the ignition, torn between two impossible choices. Follow the path the figure had shown them, or try to turn around and escape into the endless night. The silence of the abandoned town pressed in around them, waiting. And then, as if on cue, the radio came alive one last time. "Choose carefully." The static hissed, and then the car went silent again. The air around the car felt like it had thickened, heavy and suffocating, as though the entire town of Silver Peak was waiting for their decision. Daniel's fingers tapped nervously on the steering wheel, his eyes darting between Matthew, who was gripping the door handle, and Claire, who clung desperately to his arm. It was 2:06 a.m. The lantern outside flickered weakly, its glow casting warped shadows against the chained doors of the wooden building. The voice on the radio had fallen silent again, leaving only the faint rattle of the wind moving through broken shutters. The stillness was unbearable. "Matthew," Daniel finally said, his voice low but firm. "Don't open that door yet." Matthew turned to him, eyes wide, his breath fogging the glass. "If we sit here doing nothing, we'll never leave. That thing brought us here for a reason." Claire shook her head, her voice trembling. "Or maybe it brought us here to die. Can't you see? It wants us inside. Nothing good is waiting for us in there." The argument swelled, but Daniel cut them both off. "Enough! If we do this, we do it together. No one goes alone." They sat in silence, the only sound the faint ticking of the car's cooling engine. Finally, Daniel killed the headlights. Darkness swallowed the square, leaving only the dim glow of the lantern outside. It felt wrong to leave the light off, but somehow safer not to announce themselves so boldly. They opened the doors slowly, the sound of hinges groaning unnaturally loud in the empty town. The night air bit into their skin, dry and cold, almost too cold for August in Nevada. Claire hesitated, gripping Daniel's sleeve like a child. "Don't let go of me," she whispered. Together, the three of them stepped out. Their footsteps echoed faintly against the cracked cobblestones as they approached the chained doors. The lantern burned steadily now, as if its flame knew they were coming. Daniel reached for the heavy chain. It was rusted, the padlock corroded, yet it looked strong enough to resist any effort. But when his hand touched it, the lock snapped open with a metallic click, falling to the ground on its own. Claire gasped, stepping back. The doors creaked open an inch, as though inviting them in. Matthew's jaw tightened. There's no turning back now. They pushed the doors open, the wood groaning as though resisting their touch. The darkness inside was absolute, swallowing the weak glow of the lantern when Daniel lifted it to shine through the gap. Slowly, they stepped across the threshold. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the faint smell of mildew. Their footsteps crunched against old wooden boards that creaked with each step. Daniel held the lantern high, its flickering glow revealing a wide hall lined with benches on either side. It looked like an old meeting hall, or perhaps a church. The walls were covered in peeling wallpaper, the faded pattern barely visible in the dim light. At the far end of the hall, a raised platform stood, and on it, a large wooden chair that resembled a throne. As they moved deeper inside, the doors slammed shut behind them with a deafening bang. Claire screamed, spinning around. The lantern's flame wavered, nearly going out, but held steady. "We're trapped," she whispered. Before Daniel could reply, the lantern grew brighter, its light swelling unnaturally until it illuminated the entire hall. The benches were no longer empty. Figures sat in every row, men, women, and children, dressed in old 19th century clothing. Their faces were pale, their eyes hollow and black, and not one of them moved. Claire clutched Daniel's arm, trembling violently. Matthew's voice cracked as he whispered, They're watching us." The silence was unbearable, pressing down on them like a weight. Then, slowly, one of the figures on the platform began to rise. It was the same man from the road, the lantern bearer. But now he stood tall, his features clearer than before. His face was gaunt, his skin stretched thin over his bones, and his eyes burned with an unnatural glow. He lifted his lantern, and his mouth opened. The radio in Daniel's pocket came alive. Judgment. The word reverberated through the hall, echoing from every wall. Claire sobbed, "Please, no, please." The figure pointed at them, his bony hand trembling. The crowd of figures in the benches turned their heads in unison, their black eyes fixed on the three intruders. Daniel's heart pounded. "What do you want from us?" he shouted, his voice cracking. The radio hissed, then the voice spoke again. A choice. The lantern's light grew brighter, blinding them. When their vision cleared, the hall had changed. The benches were gone. The crowd had vanished. The only thing that remained was the throne at the far end, and upon it sat a skeleton, dressed in tattered robes, its empty sockets staring at them. The lantern bearer stood beside it, silent now. Matthew stepped forward, though his legs shook. This isn't real. We're dreaming." But then the skeleton's jaw moved, creaking as it opened and closed. The radio translated the sound. "One of you stays, the others go free." The words echoed in the silence. Claire's scream filled the hall. "No, no, we're not doing this." Matthew stumbled back, shaking his head violently. "This is insane. We're not playing your game." But Daniel knew. Deep down, he understood the truth. This place wasn't bound by their rules. Whatever this was, whatever had dragged them here, it wasn't going to let them leave without a price. The lantern bearer raised his light again, and the hall shifted once more. Now they were standing outside, back in the town square. The night was still, the buildings once again ruins instead of restored. The skeleton, the throne, the crowd, they were gone. But the voice lingered, carried on the wind. Choose or none leave. It was 2:39 a.m. The three of them stood in the cold night air, the lantern at their feet flickering weakly. Daniel looked at Matthew, then at Claire. Both of them were pale, trembling, their faces etched with terror. Claire clutched Daniel's arm, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Please don't let them take me." Matthew shook his head violently. "Don't you dare look at me. I'm not staying here." The whispering began again, rising all around them, coming from every direction. The voices layered over one another, impossible to ignore. Choose, choose, choose. Daniel's chest tightened. He could hardly breathe. He knew time was running out. The longer they waited, the louder the voices grew, pressing into their skulls, shaking the ground beneath their feet. The lantern flared, the flames stretching tall and white, casting monstrous shadows across the ruins of Silver Peak. And then, without warning, the radio spoke again, clearer than ever before. "Decide before dawn." The lantern's light dimmed, returning to its faint flicker. The whispers faded into silence. It was 3 a.m. The three of them stood there, broken by fear, knowing the clock was now against them. Somewhere, beyond the ruins of Silver Peak, dawn was approaching. And when it came, if they hadn't made their choice, none of them would leave Highway 50 alive. The voices faded with the wind, leaving only the sound of their own breathing and the distant creak of ruined buildings shifting under the desert air. The lantern's glow pulsed faintly on the ground, like a heartbeat counting down the seconds to dawn. Daniel, Claire, and Matthew stood frozen, unable to speak, unable to choose. The silence of Silver Peak pressed in on them, heavy, unrelenting, as if the town itself was waiting. Somewhere in the distance, a lone coyote howled, and then even that sound died away. It was 3:12 a.m. Time was slipping through their fingers, and they all knew it. None of them wanted to admit it aloud, but the truth was clear. Before the first light of morning touched Highway 50, they would have to decide. One would stay behind, the others might go free, or none of them would leave at all. The lantern flickered once more, brighter than before, and the voice returned, soft, patient, merciless. "The choice is yours." And then, just as suddenly, everything went silent again. The three of them stood in the ruins of Silver Peak, the weight of the night pressing down on them, as the long road of Highway 50 stretched endlessly in their minds. What waited at dawn, none of them could yet know. That was the story of what we saw on Highway 50 at midnight. If you enjoyed tonight's tale, don't forget to subscribe to Shadow Storyteller. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think. What choice would you have made if you were with them on that lonely road? Until the next story, sleep well, if you can.